And welcome, my friends, to Beyond the Well. This week is something special, or should I say something pivotal. If there was an episode to start this podcast on, well, it might just be this one. The stories before this have been fun, and I hope to share more like them, but there's more, so much more. I'm going to share an experience that happened to me, your narrator. Some parts of this story, well, they are metaphorical. Some are frighteningly real as it gets. I'll leave it up to you, my listeners, to decide which is which. And in the meantime, I hope you have as much fun as I have. There's a certain peace to morning walks. The kind of peace that comes when the world feels still, when the air is crisp and clean, and when the only sounds are the rustling of leaves and the distant chatter of birds. I take this walk almost every day, through the woods behind my house. It's very familiar to me, like an old friend. But there was a day not too long ago that was different. Very different. And I want to tell you about it. It was fall. The trees were in full color, their leaves bursting with reds, oranges, golds, yellows. The ground crunched softly underfoot as I followed my normal narrow trail that winds up into the deeper of the forest. The sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling the path in shifting patches of warmth. The birds were singing their morning songs, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the faint buzz of bees. It was perfect, just absolutely beautiful. As I pushed deeper into the woods, something, however, shifted. At first it was subtle, like a faint weight pressing on my mind, something I couldn't get out of my head, but I didn't know what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something heavy, almost leading me on, kind of like calling to me. I brushed it off, assuming it was just my imagination or maybe the lingering stress of the week. But as I continued, the feeling grew. It wasn't just heavy. It felt desperate. And then, almost without warning, the forest grew quiet. Not quiet in the way forests sometimes get, where you can still hear the occasional crack of a branch or the distant rustle of leaves. No, this was different. This was absolute silence. No birds, no insects, not even the wind stirring the trees. It was as if I was in a bubble, and the forest itself was holding its breath. And the weight in my chest, well, it grew stronger. It was oppressive now, like an invisible hand pressing down on me. My steps slowed, then stopped altogether. Something called my name. It knew me. It was personal. I didn't hear it, not with my ears anyway, but I felt it. A pull, a summons. It was coming from the thicket of trees off to my right. I looked over, and the trees and brush were thick enough that I couldn't really see through them, but there was something there. I don't know why I stepped off the trail. Logic told me to turn around and go home. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I stopped and felt massive surges of anxiety, but this drive compelled me to move forward out into that bush. It drew me forward. I pushed through the bramble, each step harder than the last. The air felt heavier, the shadows seemed to get darker, and the sunlight, well, it started to disappear. It seemed to be swallowed up by this encroaching gloom that was all-encompassing. I was breathing very heavily at this point. I felt a small trickle of sweat run down the small of my back. The branches clawed at my arms and legs, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. And then, just as the darkness had closed in, I broke through. And the world changed. I stepped out into this beautiful meadow bathed in sunlight. The sky was a vivid blue, the kind that seems almost too perfect to be real. The grass was tall and golden, swaying gently in the breeze. And this oppressive weight, well, it was gone. It was replaced by something different, though, something light yet urgent, like a whisper carried on the wind. I stood there turning in slow circles, trying to take it all in. This wasn't just any meadow. I knew I had never been here before, and yet it felt familiar. like I was meant to be there. And that is when I saw it. Across the meadow, at the edge of the trees, was a small structure. A well, the kind you find in an old fairy tale, made out of weathered stones and a simple wooden roof with a crank for a bucket. My feet started moving before I even realized it. Something was pulling me forward. Not the heavy, oppressive pull I had felt in the forest, something different. And it felt urgent. I started running. The grass brushed up against my legs as I closed the distance, and when I reached the well, I leaned over the edge and looked down. The water was impossibly clear, shimmering like some kind of liquid glass. I couldn't see a bottom, just an endless depth that seemed to stretch forever. Then, without thinking, I reached out and touched the surface. In an instant, the world dissolved. I was no longer standing by that well. I was falling through the well, through the water, through space itself. I can't fully describe what I saw. Even now, the memory feels like a dream. I saw stars and planets, entire galaxies rushing past me. It didn't matter if I closed my eyes or had them open. It was like this experience was me. And then, suddenly, I was speeding towards a beautiful blue planet. It was breathtaking. The oceans shimmered in the sunlight. The forests stretched endlessly and the mountains rose like giants into the sky. I watched for ages as this beautiful planet moved through different times and seasons, mixing with all that came in and through her. And then into my mind came a name. Aldarion. I saw her people, every single one of them, from the beginning to the present. Kings, queens, farmers, merchants, children laughing and playing in the streets. I saw their triumphs, I saw their struggles, their joys, and their sorrows. But beneath it all, I saw something else. A shadow. It crept through the world, in the world, beneath the world, lurking in all the deep places, a hunger, a craving for power and control. It was vast and terrible, with an unending lust to consume everything and exert complete domination through suffering, pain, loss, and absolute terror. And then, through that dark chaos, I heard something small and simple. It was a voice. It sounded like a bell, clear and beautiful, like a song carried on the wind. It was like a bright light piercing through the darkness that was threatening to swallow the whole world. It was soft and gentle, a woman's voice. She spoke directly to me. Tell our stories. Do not let our world pass into shadow in vain. Her words pushed into my heart and mind with a pleading and a forcefulness like I have never before felt. Then, everything went dark. I again felt the sensation of falling, and then nothingness. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on my back next to the well. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the meadow, and I felt drained, like every ounce of energy had been pulled and sapped out of my body. It took almost an hour before I could even sit up. And when I finally found the strength to stand, I began the long walk home. I made it back just as the last light of day disappeared, and as I stepped through my front door, I knew one thing was for certain. My life would never be the same. For days, I could not get the experience out of my head. At night, in my dreams, I would feel the well, hear the voice, and see those clear blue eyes imploring me to share what I had seen. So, here I am, desperately trying to fulfill this overwhelming duty. I'll endeavor to share in my meager words the tragedies and triumphs of the many, many, many who live there. This process I expect to take years to complete. And yet, there is still much at this very moment happening within Aldarion. It is no small thing to decide on which stories to tell. It would take many lifetimes to share it all. This connection marks the beginning of a journey for as many who wish to join me as we venture forth beyond the well. Welcome, my friends, to the stories of Aldarion.